It began with a leak. A single audio clip that rippled through the corridors of Buckingham Palace like an earthquake. Within hours, whispers turned to panic, and by morning, King Charles's trust in Queen Camilla was gone. The recording captured in secret didn't just reveal deceit. It shattered the illusion of unity at the heart of the monarchy. For the first time, the king's private fury became a public weapon. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The leak arrived quietly, tucked inside an anonymous email sent to 3 different editors across London. What seemed at first like another tabloid trick soon turned into the most explosive royal scandal in decades. The voice in the recording was unmistakable. It was Camilla unfiltered, laughing in private conversation about Charles's fragile command and outdated vision for the crown. Within minutes of verification, the audio spread like wildfire, echoing across the airwaves and social media, dragging Buckingham Palace into an unprecedented storm. Inside the palace walls, silence reigned. Aides rushed from room to room, phones glued to their ears, voices lowered but trembling. For decades, the monarchy had survived scandals, betrayals, and rumors, but this was different. This was direct, personal, undeniable. Charles's face, pale and unreadable, betrayed none of the inner chaos that now consumed him. Those close to him said his eyes spoke louder than words, a quiet devastation that bordered on fury. At first, he refused to believe it. He ordered his private secretary to confirm, then reconfirm, the authenticity of the tape. When proof arrived, the king reportedly stood in silence for several minutes before turning away and muttering, "So it's true." The man who had once fought to have Camilla accepted by the public now faced the realization that the woman he defended might have mocked him behind his back. The pain was not just personal, it was political, threatening to destabilize everything he had built since his coronation. The palace press office scrambled to respond, releasing a vague statement about fabrications and distortions, but by then the narrative had already escaped their control. Late-night broadcasts looped Camilla's voice, dissecting every pause, every smirk, every cruel line. The monarchy's most private wound had become public entertainment. And as dawn broke, even the most loyal supporters began to question how much of their so-called royal unity was a performance. Behind closed doors, the royal family fractured. William and Catherine, blindsided like the rest of the world, offered quiet support but remained cautious. Senior courtiers demanded an internal inquiry, fearing that if the king didn't act swiftly, the institution's moral authority would crumble. For centuries, royal decorum had been the monarchy's shield, but now that shield was cracked. Every whisper of discontent, every rumor of rivalry, suddenly seemed plausible. The illusion of stability evaporated overnight. And yet, through all the chaos, Charles remained silent. He attended meetings, read briefings, and carried out duties with cold precision. To the public, it looked like restraint. But those who knew him best saw something else, a storm building behind calm eyes, the weight of betrayal tightening around his heart. His silence was not weakness, it was strategy. Because when a monarch is wounded, his response is never impulsive, it's deliberate, measured, and final. That's when whispers began about the king's new resolve, about secret conversations with his closest advisors, and a quiet determination forming behind palace doors. To the outside world, he was dignified. But inside Windsor's gates, something was shifting. This wasn't about forgiveness anymore. It was about legacy. And Charles knew that every legacy begins with a reckoning. But behind the king's silence was something far more dangerous: his plan to end her reign from within, a decision that would soon upend the monarchy's very foundation. While the world speculated on the leaked audio, an invisible war erupted inside Clarence House. Courtiers whispered of icy dinners and closed doors. Charles withdrew from public view, spending hours with his most trusted advisors. This wasn't just marital discord, it was a royal coup in motion. The king, humiliated and betrayed, was preparing to strip his queen of her crown, piece by piece, without ever saying the words aloud. In the days following the scandal, Clarence House became a fortress of secrets. Publicly, the king and queen maintained their composure, duty-bound smiles, scripted appearances, polite exchanges before the cameras. But behind the palace gates, the silence between them grew heavier with every passing hour. Charles began to cancel engagements that once featured them together. Their shared calendar, once a symbol of unity, was quietly split in two. Insiders whispered that even their private breakfast meetings had vanished. The monarch who once leaned on Camilla for emotional strength now turned instead to his private secretary, his confidants, and most notably his heir. The legacy sessions, as they were discreetly labeled in internal memos, began soon after. These were not strategy briefings or ceremonial discussions. They were war councils. In those closed-door meetings, Charles and his most trusted aides mapped out the possible consequences of a public separation, the legal implications of removing a queen consort's privileges, and the optics of reclaiming moral authority. Prince William's role was cautious but crucial. Ever the diplomat, he urged restraint but made one thing clear: the crown must survive this. That phrase became the quiet mantra guiding Charles's every move. But as the king planned in silence, Camilla was far from idle. Her old allies, former courtiers, society friends, and seasoned media insiders began circulating rumors to counter the narrative. Leaks appeared in sympathetic outlets, suggesting the king was emotionally unstable and struggling under pressure. Carefully timed stories painted Camilla as a victim, the loyal wife enduring unfair scrutiny. Every whisper, every leak, was designed to buy her time to cloud the truth, to weaken the king's resolve, and to make the world question his judgment. Inside Clarence's house, loyalties fractured. Some aides aligned themselves with the king, sensing that his patience was gone and his reign entering a new phase of assertive control. Others, tied to Camilla through years of personal loyalty, began quietly feeding her information from within. It was espionage under royal etiquette, smiles masking betrayal, protocol covering sabotage. The corridors that once echoed with royal ceremony now pulsed with paranoia. Every look carried a question. Every conversation, a risk. The king's advisors urged caution. Move too fast, one warned, and you risk appearing vindictive. But Charles's silence was already his message. Behind every calculated pause, behind every seemingly routine public duty, there was purpose. His inner circle drafted what they called Operation Windsor Reset, a plan to quietly restructure the monarchy's future. The document outlined steps to limit Camilla's influence, realign key palace roles, and reinforce the image of a strong, untarnished crown. It was the blueprint for an internal revolution, one designed to restore order without declaring war. Yet, power has never yielded easily in the royal world. Even as Charles's plan gained momentum, Camilla's instincts honed by decades of palace politics kicked in. She began positioning herself as indispensable once again, leveraging public sympathy and private guilt. The king, though determined, knew the cost of confrontation. To remove her outright could fracture not just his marriage, but the very perception of monarchy itself. Every step forward was shadowed by the risk of implosion. And so, the battle lines hardened: Charles in quiet defiance, Camilla in strategic charm. Neither would retreat. Not yet. But as the king prepared to reclaim control, he underestimated one thing: the lengths to which Camilla would go to protect her power. But Camilla was no stranger to manipulation, and before Charles could act, she launched a desperate counterattack that threatened to destroy him instead. While the world speculated on the leaked audio, an invisible war erupted inside Clarence's house. Courtiers whispered of icy dinners and closed doors. Charles withdrew from public view, spending hours with his most trusted advisors. This wasn't just marital discord, it was a royal coup in motion. The king, humiliated and betrayed, was preparing to strip his queen of her crown, piece by piece, without ever saying the words aloud. In the days following the scandal, Clarence's house became a fortress of secrets. Publicly, the king and queen maintained their composure, duty-bound smiles, scripted appearances, polite exchanges before the cameras. But behind the palace gates, the silence between them grew heavier with every passing hour. Charles began to cancel engagements that once featured them together. Their shared calendar, once a symbol of unity, was quietly split in two. Insiders whispered that even their private breakfast meetings had vanished. The monarch who once leaned on Camilla for emotional strength now turned instead to his private secretary, his confidants, and most notably his heir. The legacy sessions, as they were discreetly labeled in internal memos, began soon after. These were not strategy briefings or ceremonial discussions. They were war councils. In those closed-door meetings, Charles and his most trusted aides mapped out the possible consequences of a public separation, the legal implications of removing a queen consort's privileges, and the optics of reclaiming moral authority. Prince William's role was cautious but crucial. Ever the diplomat, he urged restraint but made one thing clear: the crown must survive this. That phrase became the quiet mantra guiding Charles's every move. But as the king planned in silence, Camilla was far from idle. Her old allies, former courtiers, society friends, and seasoned media insiders began circulating rumors to counter the narrative. Leaks appeared in sympathetic outlets, suggesting the king was emotionally unstable and struggling under pressure. Carefully timed stories painted Camilla as a victim, the loyal wife enduring unfair scrutiny. Every whisper, every leak, was designed to buy her time to cloud the truth, to weaken the king's resolve, and to make the world question his judgment. Inside Clarence's house, loyalties fractured. Some aides aligned themselves with the king, sensing that his patience was gone and his reign entering a new phase of assertive control. Others, tied to Camilla through years of personal loyalty, began quietly feeding her information from within. It was espionage under royal etiquette, smiles masking betrayal, protocol covering sabotage. The corridors that once echoed with royal ceremony now pulsed with paranoia. Every look carried a question. Every conversation, a risk. The king's advisors urged caution. Move too fast, one warned, and you risk appearing vindictive. But Charles's silence was already his message. Behind every calculated pause, behind every seemingly routine public duty, there was purpose. His inner circle drafted what they called Operation Windsor Reset, a plan to quietly restructure the monarchy's future. The document outlined steps to limit Camilla's influence, realign key palace roles, and reinforce the image of a strong, untarnished crown. It was the blueprint for an internal revolution, one designed to restore order without declaring war. Yet, power has never yielded easily in the royal world. Even as Charles's plan gained momentum, Camilla's instincts honed by decades of palace politics kicked in. She began positioning herself as indispensable once again, leveraging public sympathy and private guilt. The king, though determined, knew the cost of confrontation. To remove her outright could fracture not just his marriage, but the very perception of monarchy itself. Every step forward was shadowed by the risk of implosion. And so, the battle lines hardened, Charles in quiet defiance, Camilla in strategic charm. Neither would retreat. Not yet. But as the king prepared to reclaim control, he underestimated one thing: the lengths to which Camilla would go to protect her power. But Camilla was no stranger to manipulation, and before Charles could act, she launched a desperate counterattack that threatened to destroy him instead. Cornered and exposed, Camilla fought back the only way she knew how: with charm, fear, and calculated leaks. Within days, sympathetic headlines appeared, painting her as a victim of palace politics. Friends from her old circles in the press were suddenly everywhere, defending her honor. But what no one realized was that Camilla wasn't defending her marriage. She was defending her empire, the quiet network of influence she'd built around the king. It began subtly. One morning, newspapers that had been brutal just a week earlier suddenly changed their tone. Instead of focusing on the leaked audio, they ran pieces on Camilla's quiet resilience and strength under pressure. Phrases like the misunderstood queen and a victim of internal rivalry began appearing in glossy magazines and weekend columns. Her allies in the press, editors she'd nurtured over decades of private lunches and exclusive briefings, were back in action, running interference on her behalf. The goal was simple: shift public pity toward her and suspicion toward Charles. Soon, whispers of the king's temper began circulating. Anonymous sources described him as volatile and unpredictable, fueling the narrative that the real problem inside Clarence's house wasn't Camilla's deceit but the king's fragile composure. For Camilla, it was a masterstroke, turning defense into offense, guilt into sympathy. To the outside world, it looked like a woman struggling to hold her marriage together, while the institution she had served now turned its back on her. Behind palace walls, her moves were even more precise. She appeared at charity events with a trembling voice and misty eyes, letting photographers capture the perfect image of wounded dignity. Every public gesture, every well-timed smile, was designed to say, "I am not the betrayer, I am the betrayed." Her words to aides were carefully chosen, her tone soft, maternal, humble. But those who truly knew her could see the calculation behind every tear. And still, Camilla wasn't done. Leaks began emerging from royal insiders, claiming that forgiveness talks were underway between the king and queen. The message was clear: Camilla was trying to heal, but it was Charles who couldn't move past the scandal. It was manipulation wrapped in grace, a strategy as old as the monarchy itself. The world loves a wounded woman, and Camilla understood that better than anyone. Behind the scenes, she reached out to Catherine and William, framing herself as a grandmother wronged by gossip and desperate to protect the family's unity. Those calls weren't for reconciliation, they were for optics. If the public saw the future king and queen offering sympathy, even privately, it would reinforce her narrative of innocence. But Catherine, ever intuitive, reportedly kept her distance, sensing that this was not a plea, it was a trap. Meanwhile, Camilla's influence pulsed through her old contacts in the media world. Editors who owed her favors began quietly burying stories unfavorable to her. Trusted journalists were granted selective access on one condition: portray the queen as the victim of an internal witch hunt. It worked. Public opinion began to tilt, even slightly, in her favor. Talk shows questioned whether the king had gone too far. For the first time since the scandal broke, Camilla wasn't losing, she was regaining ground. But inside Clarence's house, that illusion crumbled quickly. The palace staff knew the truth. They saw the quiet fury in Charles's eyes, the distance between them that no amount of public sympathy could repair. What the outside world interpreted as royal recovery was, in truth, a cold war of loyalty and control. Every statement Camilla made was dissected. Every article published about her was traced back to its source. And slowly, methodically, Charles began connecting the dots between her charm offensive and the network of power she had quietly built over the years. To the public, it looked like a woman saving her reputation. To Charles, it looked like an empire operating in plain sight. The queen consort had weaponized sympathy. But in doing so, she had revealed something even more dangerous: how deep her roots had grown inside the palace machinery itself. But the more Camilla tried to rewrite the story, the closer Charles came to uncovering the full extent of her deception. What began as one audio leak soon became something darker. Investigators hired by the palace uncovered encrypted communications, private recordings, and hidden notes that revealed a decade-long pattern of deceit. The lies weren't just personal, they were political. Camilla had allegedly manipulated appointments, press narratives, even state briefings. The queen consort wasn't just lying to the king. She was rewriting his reign. The investigation started quietly, under the codename the Windsor Review. Officially, it was meant to assess communications integrity within the royal household. Unofficially, it was a hunt for the truth, an attempt to uncover the full scope of what the queen consort had done. Charles, weary of speculation and leaks, had finally given the order. No one outside his inner circle knew the real reason why, but those close enough to guess said the king had grown tired of shadows and half-truths. He wanted evidence. He wanted clarity. And, above all, he wanted justice. What the investigators found was staggering. Hidden behind layers of private email addresses, burner phones, and coded notes were conversations between Camilla and senior media executives, messages that painted a chilling picture of influence and manipulation. For years, she had allegedly shaped headlines, silenced damaging stories, and promoted narratives that subtly weakened her rivals. The same newspapers that once mocked her had, under her quiet orchestration, become her weapons. Her fingerprints were everywhere, on leaked palace statements, on retracted stories, even on the timing of royal announcements designed to overshadow unfavorable news. But it didn't stop there. Internal documents revealed that Camilla had allegedly played a hand in certain royal appointments. Key figures close to her had risen through the palace ranks during Charles's early reign, people whose loyalty, it seemed, belonged not to the king, but to her. Their roles in communication, planning, and even ceremonial coordination gave her quiet control over how the monarchy appeared to the world. It was influence without title, power disguised as partnership. And for the first time, Charles saw what had been hiding in plain sight: an entire network built to sustain her dominance. The discovery sent shockwaves through the senior court. The quiet hum of gossip turned to open disbelief as the evidence grew undeniable. One internal memo, unearthed during the review, confirmed the manipulation of an event intended to honor Charles's environmental initiatives. The press coverage that day? Entirely redirected to focus on Camilla's grace and leadership. It wasn't coincidence, it was design. And every time the king's authority had wavered, Camilla's presence had conveniently filled the void. When Catherine was quietly informed of the findings, her reaction was measured but resolute. She reportedly told Charles, "You cannot rule beside someone who rules you." Those words lingered. They weren't harsh, they were true. Catherine understood the monarchy's fragility better than anyone. She knew that once trust inside the royal circle is lost, it can never be restored. It was her calm conviction that pushed Charles toward action, not out of vengeance, but out of necessity. So the king summoned his most trusted advisors and gave an unprecedented order: the formation of a secret tribunal within the palace walls. It would operate in total silence, bound by royal privilege and shielded from public scrutiny. Its purpose to verify every piece of evidence, every message, every name connected to the deception. The tribunal, known only to a select few as the Windsor Review, became the monarchy's most classified internal proceeding since the abdication crisis. Days turned to weeks, and the findings became impossible to ignore. The deeper they looked, the clearer it became that this wasn't just a lapse in loyalty, it was a betrayal of trust woven into the monarchy's very core. Camilla's empire of influence had been built on secrecy, sustained by fear, and protected by the illusion of devotion. But among all the recordings, notes, and testimonies, there was one file that stood apart: a single conversation so damning, so personal, that it would change everything. It wasn't just evidence. It was the moment that sealed Camilla's fate forever. In the final recording, Camilla's voice trembled not with guilt, but arrogance. She mocked the king's frailty, questioned his legacy, and laughed about holding the real power. When Charles heard those words, something inside him broke. Years of loyalty, patience, and compromise vanished in an instant. The queen consort's reign wasn't merely in danger, it was finished. And for the first time, the king made a choice not as a husband, but as a monarch. The recording was brief, just over 7 minutes, but it carried the weight of a lifetime. In it, Camilla spoke freely, unguarded, her tone sharp with disdain. She mocked Charles's leadership, belittled his vision for the monarchy, and hinted at manipulating decisions from behind the curtain. It was the final confirmation of everything the king had feared but refused to believe. The woman he had defended for decades, the partner he had risked reputation and respect to legitimize, had turned his crown into her playground. The cruelty wasn't just in the words, it was in the laughter that followed, cold and triumphant. When the king first listened, he didn't move. Those present said the silence in the room was suffocating. His hands, usually steady, trembled as the recording played to its end. The betrayal wasn't new, but hearing it aloud stripped away denial. He'd endured humiliation before, weathered scandals, and forgiven sins the world never knew of, but this was different. This was personal. This was total. Behind the mask of composure, his heart cracked in a way only a lifetime of duty could conceal. Later that evening, Charles retreated into private quarters and spoke to no one. For the first time in his reign, the king cancelled his schedule indefinitely. Courtiers whispered of a man in mourning not for a wife, but for the illusion of love. The crown he once saw as a shared purpose had become a burden only he could bear. Alone he faced the truth. His loyalty to Camilla had cost him the trust of his people, his children, and now, his own peace of mind. But grief soon hardened into resolve. Within days, the king summoned Prince Edward and Princess Anne. The meeting was short, discreet, and history-shifting. For years, they had stayed silent, maintaining the decorum expected of royal blood. But now, they stood firm beside their brother. And ever blunt, is said to have told him, "You've protected her long enough. It's time to protect the crown." Those words pierced the fog of doubt that still clung to him. It was no longer about heartbreak, it was about honor. The impact of the final recording spread beyond the palace gates. Select excerpts leaked by unknown sources made their way into the press. The tone of Camilla's voice, dripping with superiority, shocked the public. Sympathy shifted almost overnight. Headlines that once defended her now questioned her integrity. "The crown betrayed" became the phrase dominating the nation's discourse. For the first time, the people saw what Charles had endured behind the gilded facade, a monarch betrayed by the very person meant to uphold his legacy. Inside the palace, the machinery of consequence began to turn. Lawyers, courtiers, and advisors drafted a document that would change royal history. The decree was written in deliberate, measured language but carried devastating force: the formal termination of Camilla's reign. Every word was weighed, every phrase chosen with precision to preserve the monarchy's dignity even as it exiled one of its own. When the king reviewed the final draft, he read it slowly, line by line, as though engraving it into memory. There was no triumph in his eyes, only quiet devastation. He signed not as a man seeking revenge, but as a ruler reclaiming his throne from manipulation. With that single signature, the king ended the era of deception and began one of reckoning. But to dethrone a queen is no simple act, and Charles knew that one wrong move could destroy the entire House of Windsor. It was codenamed Operation Crownfall. A secret campaign orchestrated by Charles's inner circle to remove Camilla from power without triggering constitutional chaos. Every step was choreographed: legal maneuvers, public statements, even timed appearances. The king's reign depended on precision and secrecy. Because one leak, one whisper, could expose everything before the final decree was signed. In the weeks following the final recording, the palace transformed into a fortress of strategy and silence. The king's private chambers became a war room where decisions were weighed with military precision. Lawyers, historians, and senior advisors gathered in hushed meetings, poring over centuries of royal precedent. The question was as dangerous as it was delicate. Could a reigning king legally strip his queen consort of title and duty without dismantling the institution itself? Every document, every historical case was scrutinized, but no blueprint existed for what Charles was attempting. This wasn't abdication or divorce, it was erasure. The first stage of crownfall was legal containment. A team of trusted constitutional experts drafted the framework for what they termed a quiet revocation. Camilla's royal duties would be gradually reduced under the guise of health and personal reflection. Her public appearances would slow, her access to state briefings restricted, her advisors reassigned. It was, in essence, a royal exile hidden behind formality. To outsiders, it would appear voluntary. But within the palace walls, everyone knew the truth: this was the beginning of the end. Next came the restructuring of power. Charles's loyalists, carefully handpicked from across the royal and political spectrum, began assuming control of key operations once overseen by Camilla's circle. Schedules were rewritten. Committees dissolved. Even her private staff were reassigned without explanation. Those who once served her found themselves reporting to new superiors with unfamiliar orders. Bit by bit, the architecture of her influence was dismantled, replaced by loyal operators who answered directly to the king. All the while, the press remained blissfully unaware. To distract the media, the palace launched a series of unrelated stories, charitable initiatives, environmental projects, and state visits, all designed to dominate headlines. Royal correspondents, sensing a lull, dismissed the Queen's absence as exhaustion. Behind the curtain, however, the palace machinery was spinning faster than ever. Crownfall wasn't just about removing Camilla, it was about rewriting perception before truth could surface. Charles knew the cost of failure. A single misstep could turn a private scandal into a constitutional nightmare. He rehearsed his next move with almost surgical restraint. Advisors drafted an emotional national address, a speech of honesty and redemption in which the king would acknowledge the strain on his marriage, affirm his duty to the nation, and promise a renewed era of transparency. It was meant to be a masterstroke: control the narrative, reclaim public trust, and end Camilla's reign without ever mentioning her name. But even as the plan unfolded, the pressure inside the palace became unbearable. Staff whispered of sleepless nights, of Charles pacing alone in the royal study, torn between justice and humanity. Prince William's counsel was calm but firm: you cannot protect both her and the crown. Those words echoed through the marble halls, fueling the king's resolve. The final drafts of the royal order were ready, sealed under lock and key, awaiting the moment of execution. As Operation Crownfall neared completion, every person involved carried the same haunting awareness: if Camilla discovered what was coming, she would not go quietly. Her influence was not just social or ceremonial. It was deeply entrenched, reaching into the very institutions now plotting her fall. For all the king's control, he was still navigating a battlefield littered with loyalties to the very woman he intended to dethrone. And just when victory seemed within reach, fate turned. Somewhere within the palace network, a single betrayal, a whispered warning. Camilla learned the truth. Her composure vanished, replaced by fury and fear. She would not surrender her crown without a fight. But as Crownfall moved closer to completion, Camilla uncovered the truth, and her retaliation threatened to take the monarchy down with her. Camilla refused to vanish quietly. From behind gilded doors, she plotted her final move, a live televised appearance meant to reclaim her image and corner the king emotionally before the nation. Advisors begged Charles to intervene, but he let her speak. And when she did, the mask slipped. The public didn't see a wronged queen. They saw a woman unraveling before their eyes. In the hours before the broadcast, Clarence House was a battlefield of nerves. No official approval had been given for Camilla's address, yet the palace press team received word that a network had already booked a primetime slot. She had gone rogue. Determined to salvage what little of her reputation remained, Camilla believed that if she could speak directly to the public, she could rewrite her downfall. To her, the monarchy was not collapsing, it was misunderstanding her. She thought one speech could remind Britain why she had once been accepted, why the king had once fought the world to have her crowned. But this was not the world she once knew. The nation had changed, and sympathy had long since shifted. When the cameras rolled, Camilla's words carried the tone of defiance rather than grace. She spoke of loyalty, of sacrifice, of love twisted by jealousy and politics. Her voice trembled not with emotion, but with bitterness. She accused certain forces of conspiring to erase her, painting herself as a victim of royal manipulation. But the more she spoke, the more she revealed. Her composure cracked. Her tone hardened. And for those watching, it became painfully clear this was not the dignified queen defending her truth. This was a woman losing control of her own story. Inside the palace, Charles watched in silence. Advisors hovered nervously, waiting for his reaction. Yet he remained still, his expression unreadable. He didn't interrupt the broadcast. He didn't release a statement. He simply waited. When asked why he hadn't intervened, one aide later remarked, "Because he didn't have to." She revealed everything he never needed to say. The king's restraint became his strength. His silence, so often mistaken for weakness, now spoke louder than any rebuttal ever could. In contrast, the royal family's quiet unity became a powerful image of stability. Catherine appeared alongside William in a scheduled engagement the following morning, calm and poised, representing the very dignity the monarchy needed. There was no mention of the broadcast, no response to Camilla's claims. Their composure said it all. The public, watching closely, began to draw its own conclusions. For years, the monarchy had been divided in the eyes of the people. Now, the line was clear and Camilla was on the wrong side of it. Public sentiment turned swiftly and brutally. What Camilla had intended as her redemption became her undoing. Commentators called the address unhinged. Former allies distanced themselves. Newspapers that once protected her ran headlines declaring the queen who lost the crown. It wasn't the king's advisors or legal documents that destroyed her credibility, it was her own defiance, broadcast for the world to see. The monarchy, once fragile under the weight of scandal, found unexpected renewal in her collapse. By the end of that night, the decision Charles had been delaying for weeks was made final. The official termination documents were signed, sealed, and readied for release. It was not vengeance, it was restoration. The king had given her every chance to retreat with dignity, but she had chosen defiance over grace. And in doing so, she had written the last line of her own reign. And as dawn broke over Windsor the next morning, the reign of Queen Camilla was no more, but her shadow would haunt the monarchy for years to come.